Welcome to Turning Point, a podcast series brought to you by EuroIntervention. In this 20th anniversary special, we sit down with clinicians, researchers, mentors, and innovators to explore the moments that shaped their paths and to reflect on the values we share: curiosity, education, collaboration, and a commitment to improving patient care. Because every journey has a turning point, and everyone has a story to tell. In this episode of EuroIntervention's 20th anniversary podcast, we are joined by Professor Patrick Serruys, a true pioneer whose vision has helped shape the very foundations of interventional cardiology. He has led a number of landmark clinical trials, but importantly, he is the founder and first editor-in-chief of EuroIntervention. Welcome, Professor Serruys, to the podcast. So even as a prolific researcher, academic, and mentor, you've often said that you were never truly alone, that all throughout your life you've been surrounded by mentors, companions, and eventually hundreds of fellows. Let's start at the beginning, with the people who first shaped you.
Yeah, don't forget the partner. Next to a man, there is always a partner. Forget the gender disparity. There is a setback. If you have a setback in your career, the family and the partner are very, very important to help you to recover and rebound. That's my modest addition to your statement. You were totally alone.
100% agree. So before medicine, I'm told there was philosophy, and that was indeed a very correctly philosophical statement. What role did philosophy play in your early life?
Oh, it's a long story. I spent the first 13 years of my life in Africa from 1947 to 1960. And then I came back to Europe, but my parents stay in Africa. Now, finishing the college at 17, my dream was to become a writer, maybe a philosopher, inspired by Sartre, Camus, two French existentialist philosophers. At that time, I even wrote a piece of theater, Antigone. But before going to the university, I wrote a letter to my father, still in Africa, to inform him that I wanted to study pure philosophy. And the reply was, "It is a beautiful idea, my son, but Socrates in the 21st century is not an easy life." He encouraged me to study something practical. It didn't matter what, engineer, lawyer, doctor. So I chose medicine since I believe that psychiatry would be a neat addendum to philosophy and to medicine. How naive you can be at 17, yeah? So the first year I did both philosophy and medicine, but medicine at the university was really boring. So I stopped philosophy and I kept doing medicine. And in 1966, I went to Plymouth, UK, to study physiology in a summer course with Alan Hodgkin, Nobel Prize in Physiology for his study on nerves conduction. But at some point, I realized that these physiologists were so brilliant that I will never reach their level, and I quit. But decided to continue with clinical medicine, and I trained at the University of Leuven before moving to Rotterdam for my last year of training in cardiology. So from Africa to Rotterdam, that's an existentialist trajectory.
Indeed. And did your philosophical background shape how you saw patients or medicine?
Yeah, as an existentialist, I always look at the patient and think, how would I react if it was me? Would I see the disease as the end of the life, or just would I see the disease as a challenge that would be able to cope with?
And I think that's how medicine should be looked at, because at the center of everything is the patient. So let's continue. Later in 1973, along your journey, you attended a meeting in Paris in Claude Bernard Hospital, and there you encountered someone who would change your life, Paul Hugenholtz. Tell us a bit more.
Oh yeah, he was charismatic, multilingual, and incredibly dynamic and smart. So he could change the vibes, in a room with just a few words. His leadership at the Thorax Center in Rotterdam was visionary. After returning from the US, Paul, everybody in the department called him Paul, he said, "Call me Paul," brought not only resources but also a bold ambition to develop the European cardiology and rival the USA, the ACC, and AHA, and retrospectively look at what he has created in Europe today in the form of the ESC Congress with 37,000 attendees, and indirectly in meetings like the EuroPCR with 13,000 attendees. That's his achievement, partially.
Indeed, that's a very impressive feat. So from 1976, then, you were at the Thorax Center and never left despite multiple invitations from the US in Boston, Iowa, as well as in Europe, Geneva, London, and Brussels.
Correct. But attending the third course of Andreas Grünzig in Zurich in 1980 was really pivotal in my career and in the career of my generation. The motto at that time was see one PTCA, not PCI, but PTCA, and do one the next day. The same year, I went to Frankfurt to perform with Martin Kaltenbach, the other pioneer, and Isbert Kober, the first PCI on a Dutch patient who joined me in Frankfurt. And back in Rotterdam, we performed the first PCI in Rotterdam in September 1980. Perform usually late in the day, after 5 p.m., when the surgical program was finished, when the surgeon could be standby for us, interventional cardiologists. Don't forget that the rate of technical success was around 80%. So 20% went immediately to surgery. But it was a metamorphosis for our generation. Cardiologists used to do only diagnosis and providing surgeon with fresh flesh as for surgery, as my boss Paul used to say, fresh flesh for surgery. Suddenly, we had become treating physicians with the ability not only to diagnose a cardiovascular problem, but also to fix it by ourselves. Big metamorphosis. So our first publication with Pim de Feite in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1986, that's 40 years ago, was a PTCA in patients with refractory angina pectoris, a big breakthrough.
Big breakthrough indeed, because as you said, as treating physicians, now come the exciting parts. Tell us about also the live cases and the creation of EuroCVS.
Yeah, and then came in 1983 an invitation to perform a TCT live case. As a matter of fact, we performed 3 cases on that day. First was a triple vessel disease with Palmar Schatz stent, not yet approved in the USA, then a laser wire recanalization of a CTO, and then an eluting balloon with radio-labeled heparin to trace the retention of heparin at the site of the dilatation. Before starting the show, we also impressed the American audience with a video made from an helicopter hovering around the cath lab in the Thorax Center, and with the team suddenly jumping virtually into the cath lab. That video and the live case became a landmark moment, copied by many people. But my father used to say, to be copied is a privilege. So we realized at that moment that we were damn good, as operator, and that we have something to share with the community. It was not our ambition to be public or to treat a patient publicly in a live case, but we felt the power on that day. We felt the power of education with live case demonstration. and sharing with the community what we knew so that patient would benefit from that shared information. That success gave me the idea to create our own course, the STEM course in Rotterdam, later renamed EuroCVS in Den Haag, the capital of the Netherlands. And we start that despite having no organizational support like Jean-Marco had with Marc Dancieux and the formidable Europa organization. Up front, it was a very successful course in Rotterdam. I remember a full room from day one with a lot of Americans not yet authorized by the FDA to use stent, while we had been practicing stenting since 1986. In other words, we had a lot of things to teach them.
Indeed, and even to this day, the live cases remain a key element in education in the most exciting manner. So let's discuss about Jean-Marco and what you have both built together, EuroPCR. Tell us more about this.
Yeah, I had a long-standing relationship with Jean from early Toulouse meetings. In one special issue of EuroIntervention, he described our first encounter in 1982. And in the year 2000, I had our stent course for more than 6 years. And at that moment, we changed the name in EuroCVS, and we associate the surgeon in our course. Frederick Moore from Leipzig was the star, and we moved in Den Haag, the capital of the Netherlands. Jean has moved his course from Toulouse to Paris. So he had PCR, Paris Course of Revascularization. I must say that we were seriously competing. Obviously, we were competing for financial support from the industry, but also on the impact of our two courses. But one day, we said, let's stop competing. Let's build something together. And we had that extraordinary handshake moment and decide to create EuroPCR, a merging of EuroCVS and PCR that generate EuroPCR. We had different approaches. Jean was more spontaneous, pragmatic, down-to-earth, educational. I was somewhat more structured, high-tech, focused on evidence-based medicine. My obsession was always, is the patient going to benefit from my treatment in the short and the long term? Jean progressively integrated the evidence-based medicine aspect in the course, and I became more pragmatic and educational, an extraordinary complementarity. And there was also this wonderful sense of family at EuroPCR, sharing mission with the PCR and the audience. The Dancieux dynasty, Marc and Frederick, very respectful of the educational medicine, were enormously instrumental in this pioneering day of PCI exposure.
That's such an interesting and impressive story of partnership, and looking at how that partnership gave birth to something like EuroPCR and eventually EuroIntervention. So do you see that as a model for scientific collaboration today?
Yes, absolutely. Definitely. Building something relevant for the course and for our comrade fellow operators was evident. And the result was a close collaboration. Board meetings at EuroPCR always start very slowly, I would say laboriously, by a deep, basic reflection on the question of the year and not by a dry summary of the publication and abstract publishing the literature over the year. So deciding on the course content, the question was always, what is going on in cardiology that is going to be most impactful for the audience in the community today? Focus was on relevance and building something that is relevant to the audience. I have been in other board meetings and other courses in USA and the Far East. That was frequently a totally different approach. I will not be specific.
Yeah, I think it's very important that a course is relevant to the contemporary practice of medicine and how it will be mostly relatable to its audience. But let's speak a little more now about EuroIntervention. Let's talk about writing. You've said something powerful, that you exist because you've written something. Tell us about the moment you realized that EuroPCR needed more than just a course, that it needed continuity.
Yeah, that's a nice story. I think 3 years into EuroPCR, we were in the Diderot room at the Meridian Hotel for a debrief of the last course. And I said, everything we shared during the course was extraordinary, but will disappear from our memory soon if we don't preserve it and spread the message. That's how the idea of EuroIntervention was born and generated. Now, moving from just an idea to the real things, that was an adventure, believe me. First, I had to find the managing editors who had to be a native English speaker. Initially, Jean McLadden, Irish, was approached, but he was already committed to go back to Ireland. Then I approached Paul Cummins. Paul was a research nurse in our cath lab, full of energy and with a typical Irish sense of humor. At that time, he took the risk of leaving the academic milieu at the Thorax Center and joined me without hesitation, and he did a great job. He did a great job by bringing the journal from scratch with the support of Frédéric Dancieux, brother of Marc Dancieux, the big boss of Europa. From scratch, from an amateuristic level to a professional scientific journal, going progressively from 4 issues to 6 to 8 to 12 to 24 and so on. And quite swiftly, the founders, Jean Marco, Jean Fajadet, Marie-Claude Maurice, Alec Vagnan, and others, were progressively replaced by a young generation of young wolves, Robert Byrne, Davide Capodano, Carlo Di Mario. I cannot cite all of them. Brilliant young people who helped me for many, many years. And I have wonderful memories of ping-pong dialogue, creating editorial at the last minute, usually on Friday evening. I used to start the sentence and Paul used to finish it. That's how we did all this editorial. And then Sylvie Lost joined us in 2016 and up to date has given the finishing touch to each edition of the journal and has consolidated all the assets of the journal. She did and keep doing a fantastic job.
So interesting to hear the perspective of how important a managing editor is in this whole writing and publishing process. Coming back to you exist because you've written something.
Yeah, let me tell you something different about the burnout syndrome of some of your young interventional cardiologists who fell in the routine of repetitive activity and treating behavior, so that at a certain point, the routine kills your creativity as a doctor and human being, because it's a kind of must to reflect from time to time upon your experience and put it in writing to give an historical sense to your work. Then something noble from you will persist in stone words. Conversely, you may then plan novel therapeutic approach put again in prospective writing that will create a regain of enthusiasm for the curative treatment of your patient. It has a name, it's clinical research that will benefit your patient.
Let's talk a bit more about your fellows now. You've trained more than 400 fellows and supervised over 100 PhD candidates. That's not just academic, that is indeed a legacy. You've even called it a school of fellows. But it's more than just numbers, isn't it? It's a way of working, of living, of shaping a future generation. So at the height of your activity, you said you received up to 100 fellowship requests per year. How do you reflect on that?
First, let me say that it's so fun to work with young people with the desire to help, to coach, and to create the future. Now, the selection was quite rigorous. Only a few make it true. The most motivated, I would say. 4 qualities were absolutely necessary. Team spirit, to be a team player, work ethics, reasonable intelligence, not exceptional, but reasonable intelligence, and hard work. Without hard work, nothing happens. Because hard work implies passion, and passion is essential in our job. So my favorite motto was always, the group is stronger than the individual. That was the motto in the department. And I can give you an example of motivation and passion and stubbornness, whatever you call it, with an anecdote. And the anecdote is about Carlo Di Mario, today a star in interventional cardiology for more than 3 decades. But one day he arrived at the Thorax Center with a limited practice of English, wanted to stay 3 months for research, was looking for a topic for research on a Friday evening. So, on the Friday evening, I was eager to go home, to be honest. Being jet-lagged from Japan, I asked him to find post-mortem hearts with aortic stenosis in patients previously catheterized and diagnosed with aortic stenosis, to provide me with a balloon for valvuloplasty from my own cath lab, and to book in the radiological department of the hospital an emission beam tomography. I was expecting that this assignment will be carried out in the next 3 months. But the following Wednesday, everything was in place, including the contact with the radiologist that I even didn't know at that time. Carlo has planned in the next 3 days the experiment of dilating a post-mortem stenotic aortic valve in a prehistoric multi-slide CT scan, and it became the first mechanistic paper on valvuloplasty published in 1987. Carlo stayed with us for more than 6 years, and thereafter joined the cath lab of Antonio Colombo before becoming professor at the Imperial College in London and finally going back to Florence. About the fellows, I have to mention the daily writing session at home from 8 to 11 p.m. after dinner. That was a very balancing act between science and family. Science with a big S and family with a big F. And these writing sessions have been described by a journalist in the European Heart Journal in a paper entitled The Socratic Attic, where much of the future of the stent was hatched. But these writing sessions were more than scientific. They were a kind of philosophic and even psychoanalytic component in it, this Socratic dialogue that we had in the evening. The journalist was right.
Yeah, I'm sure you also have a lot more anecdotes to tell us about your 104 fellows, is that correct, in terms of PhDs? So what have you learned from mentoring so many of them?
Yeah, it's difficult to say. First, the evidence, you cannot predict brilliance. there are unexpected career outcomes of fellow, and the rule is that in some of them I thought they were genius, but they never achieved something substantial. And other for whom I had originally some doubt about their capabilities became star. A leader's role is to create a fertile space, then let the talent blossom so that the mentee surpass the mentor, and you as a mentor has to accept that graciously. Mentorship is about building not just scientists, but human beings and good doctors and good friends. And the symbiosis between them and myself came from writing together line by line scientific paper in the attic in the evening.
Thank you for sharing all of those anecdotes about also mentorship. And throughout your whole career, which has been very illustrious and obviously very long and continuing, it's been marked by what seems to be bold decisions. Doing PCI on patients at the early stages, having grown up in Africa, feeling what one might call free and fearless, as I've been told. Do you think that shaped your willingness to take risks?
Definitely. You know, one of the most iconic pictures published in circulation, by the way, is me as a kid sitting on the back of an hippopotamus, one of the most feared animals in Africa. That's my African origin. So the story of the first patient in Rotterdam, I think we can be very short on that. Imagine that you approach a patient and that you propose to him a treatment called balloon angioplasty that you have never done alone before. That requests a certain amount of self-confidence and boldness, for sure. Yeah, you're right. I was lucky to be at the right place at the right time, but luck alone is never enough. It's about recognizing opportunity and daring to act.
Indeed, and that is true for most things in life, isn't it? So, what excites you about the future of interventional cardiology, having had such insights throughout the years and having seen so many things happen throughout interventional cardiology, often being directly involved in them?
Yeah, I mean, over the last 2 years, I've been repeatedly asked to present the same lectures entitled Coronary Revascularization in 2040. And it's amazing because when I received the Grunzig Award in the year 2000, we had done 33 drug-eluting stents. And I said, guys, there is a tsunami coming. There will be millions of people helped by that technique. And I begged the audience in the auditorium, don't pinch me, let me dream. So that's a story of prediction and the future of interventional cardiology. So in that talk, Coronary Revascularization 2040, I let my imagination work freelance and free will, I would say. Genomic, RNA therapies, gene editing, imagomics, combination of imaging and omics. The sky is really the limit now in 2025, I really believe that in the next decade we will come to an end to the atherosclerosis as we know it today. I mean, the world is changing very quickly. The role of genomic, the detection, biomimetic pharma, we don't use anymore chemistry. We use RNA, DNA, all these things, not only for early detection, but for prevention. So that's going to be predominant. Think about one thing, gene editing. A single injection to changing one letter in the alphabet of your DNA, and you are cured for the rest of your life. 2 days ago, there was a kid, 10 months old, and he has what we call a tesorismo. So it's producing an abnormal protein who goes in his brain, in his liver, everywhere. They did a CRISP technique, which is to create a gene editing just for him. So it's a personalized treatment for this disease to exist only in one patient. The injection was made, the protein disappeared from his blood. He's cured by one injection. Changing one letter in the alphabet is amazing. So interventional cardiology, certainly in the field of CAD, maybe in the very long term, will shrink in the very long term. But the pyramid of age is growing all the time. So you have that generation of 70, 80 octogenarian, nonagenarian coming, and we will be busy for a long time. But the young generation will escape PCI. And in the valve, we are already talking about prevention also of aortic stenosis. And there are 4 or 5 drugs to stop the progression of the calcification of the leaflet. So that's a very exciting time, yeah.
Indeed. Professor Serruys, you've had a legendary career. You are the founding editor of EuroIntervention and have been a pioneer in the field of interventional cardiology. If a young cardiologist asks you what's the secret to making a lasting impact, what would you say?
See your work as a hobby and an altruist passion, okay? Make somebody sick, again, healthy, is so emotionally rewarding. It's unbelievable. I can give you an anecdote about that, and all the doctors have that. So on the other hand, I like the motto, if the future is unrealistic, it will fortunately remain the future. If the future is realistic, sadly enough, it will be soon the past, okay? But we must always stay between these two phases, the past and the future. You ask the secret. I think the secret is be curious and seek what seems unreachable. And the most recent, perfect example of that is Alain Cribier. Alain Cribier pursuing an idea until it became a reality. And Grunzig and Alain Cribier belong to these unique individuals who have achieved that in medicine. So the other thing, my secret is write, share, be part of a team. And another part of the secret is to be resilient. When you are down, and we all go down at least one time in our life, the only thing to do is to stand up. It's not me saying that, it's citation of Mandela. I'm back to Africa, you see. So the other things is break the barrier between the silos. The silos are race, gender, religion, scientific discipline. Be a uniter, not a divider. That's really what we need in 2025.
That is indeed true for both science and life, and captures the essence of good scientific collaboration, as you have discussed across the many ventures you have undertaken across your career, including EuroIntervention. Thank you very much, Prof. Serruys. Thank you for listening to Turning Point, a special podcast series celebrating EuroIntervention's 20th anniversary.